Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most absolutely fascinating concepts in all of psychology, Albert Bandura's social learning theory. Seriously, this is the ultimate key to understanding how our environment shapes us, and in turn, how we shape our environment. If you've ever stopped and wondered why we act the way we do, or how we manage to pick up totally new habits just by watching the people around us, well, you are in the exact right place. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. Bridging behavior and cognition. 2. The Bobo doll experiment. 3. The 4 stages of learning. 4. Learning through others' consequences. 5. Personality and self-efficacy. And finally, 6. Summary and final thoughts. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1. Bridging behavior and cognition. To really appreciate why Bandura's work was such a game changer, we first need to set the stage and look at the world of psychology right before he came along. For a really long time, the dominant view was the strict behaviorist model. Behaviorists basically viewed the human mind as this black box. They thought learning was purely just a matter of a stimulus in the environment automatically triggering a response. It completely ignored our internal, messy thoughts. But Bandura, he totally disagreed. He championed the cognitive model instead and introduced this idea of the mediational process. Basically, it just means that between a stimulus and a response, there's us. We're in there thinking, evaluating, and processing information. Because of this, Bandura's theory is widely considered the crucial bridge between strict behaviorism and modern cognitive psychology. And the pioneer who actually built that bridge was none other than Albert Bandura, a Canadian-American psychologist and honestly one of the most influential minds of the entire 20th century. His accolades are absolutely off the charts. We're talking about a guy who was elected president of the American Psychological Association in 1974, won the highly prestigious Grammy Award in 2008, and was even handed the National Medal of Science by President Barack Obama in 2016. When you dive into his early texts, you can see exactly why his work was so highly awarded. A core tenet of his philosophy really jumps out. Bandura firmly believed that humans are not just these passive creatures, helplessly buffeted around by environmental influences. We aren't robots, right? We are active information processors. We actively think about the relationship between our behavior and what happens as a result. Section 2. The Bobo doll experiment. Let's see how this all builds into the famous real-world experiment that literally put his theory on the map. So picture the early 1960s. There was this massive debate raging in psychology, and Bandura wanted to solve a very specific mystery. It all came down to this incredibly intriguing question. Are aggressive behaviors learned through observation, or are they just innate, built-in responses we're born with? To find out, he designed something totally brilliant. He set up the famous Bobo doll experiment in 1961 at the Stanford University Nursery School. He took 72 children aged 3 to 6 and divided them into 3 very distinct groups. Group 1 watched an adult, who we call the model, behaving aggressively toward a large inflatable Bobo doll, basically punching it and shouting at it. The second group watched a non-aggressive adult just playing quietly, completely ignoring the doll. And the third, our control group, well, they had no exposure to any adult model at all. After the setup, all the children were placed into a room with toys, including that exact same Bobo doll. The result? Oh, it was revolutionary. The kids who had observed the aggressive model were far more likely to imitate those exact aggressive acts. They learned novel aggressive behaviors simply by watching. This was huge because it directly challenged the behaviorist idea that you absolutely had to be personally rewarded or punished to learn something. Nope. These kids learned completely in the absence of direct reinforcements, just through pure observation. Section 3. The 4 stages of learning. So how exactly does this observational learning happen inside our brains? Let's break down the mechanics of it. According to Bandura, you can't just passively absorb behavior like a sponge. That mediational process we talked about has to happen. Step 1 is attention. You have to actually notice and focus on the model's behavior. Step 2 is retention. You've got to remember what you saw by storing it symbolically in your memory. Think about a relatable example, like noticing a classmate get complimented by the teacher for solving a complex math problem on the whiteboard. Paying attention to what they're doing, that's step 1. Mentally storing the exact steps they use so you can use them later, that's step 2. Then we hit step 3, reproduction. You must actually have the physical and mental capability to perform the act you just observed. And finally, step 4 is motivation. You need a compelling reason to act, usually based on some kind of perceived reward or punishment. So, finishing our math example, Reproduction is you physically writing out those math steps on your own homework later that night. Motivation is the drive to actually do it because you saw your classmate get praised. And hey, you want to earn a perfect score too. Reading through Bandura's original writings, you can see how he perfectly captures this internal process. He talks a lot about imaginal and verbal representational systems. Now, that sounds like a mouthful, but it just highlights that we don't blindly copy what we see. We mentally rehearse. We code visual and verbal behaviors right there in our minds. If you watch someone swing a golf club, you might repeat the verbal instructions in your head. Keep your head down, follow through, while visualizing the swing itself. That is cognitive retention in action. Section 4. Learning through others' consequences. This brings us perfectly to what happens when we watch someone else succeed or fail. So the crucial point here is that motivation often comes from completely outside of our own direct experience. Bandura called this vicarious reinforcement. It's defined as learning and adopting a behavior by observing the positive consequences of another person's actions. When we see a role model get rewarded for doing something, it lights a fire under us. We become highly motivated to imitate them, hoping we'll get that exact same reward. To make this super clear, let's contrast a couple of everyday examples. Vicarious reinforcement is seeing a student praised for asking questions, which totally encourages you to raise your hand and ask questions too. On the flip side, we have vicarious punishment. That's seeing a coworker publicly scolded for arriving late to a meeting, which heavily encourages you to make sure you arrive on time tomorrow. You didn't have to get yelled at yourself to learn the lesson, right? You adapted your actions based entirely on someone else's outcome. Bandura formally outlined this very concept of vicarious punishment in his published work, noting that observing negative consequences fundamentally reduces our tendency to behave in similar, related ways. And honestly, it's a survival mechanism. We learn from the painful or embarrassing mistakes of others, so we don't have to make them ourselves. Section 5, Personality and Self-Efficacy. Let's transition now to the broader implications of Bandura's work and look at how this theory actually shapes who we are as individuals. Bandura introduced a really powerful concept called reciprocal determinism. This is the theory that our behavior, our internal thoughts and beliefs, and our external environment all interact and influence each other in this continuous, ongoing loop. We aren't just helpless products of our environment. The environment influences us, sure, but our cognitive thoughts dictate how we respond to it, and our resulting behaviors actively shape and change the environment around us. It's this constant three-way interaction. And a massive, absolutely crucial part of those internal thoughts is a concept Bandura is incredibly famous for: self-efficacy. This is your personal belief in your own ability to succeed, overcome challenges, and take action. Observational learning plays a huge role here. Think about on-the-job training. When you shadow a mentor and watch them effectively handle a really tough client, it doesn't just teach you what words to say, it builds your self-efficacy. You see them succeed, and you start to believe, hey, if they can do it, I can do it too. I love this quote from Bandura's later work. Through the use of symbols, individuals solve cognitive problems and engage in self-directedness and forethought. Ultimately, Bandura's message is one of profound empowerment. Because we have these amazing cognitive abilities, attention, retention, symbolic thought, we can plan. We can anticipate consequences long before they happen. We can actually guide our own destiny, rather than just reacting blindly to whatever the world throws at us. Section 6, Summary and Final Thoughts. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the Bobo doll all the way to reciprocal determinism. Let's wrap this explainer up. Here are your core takeaways. First, we now know we can acquire entirely new behaviors simply by observing others. No direct rewards required whatsoever. Second, this learning isn't just automatic. It's a deeply cognitive process requiring attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. Third, thanks to reciprocal determinism, we know our behaviors, our environments, and our internal beliefs constantly shape one another. And finally, by observing successful role models, we build the self-efficacy needed to empower ourselves and achieve our goals. Bandura's work was a truly revolutionary bridge that changed psychology forever. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up today. Look around your everyday environment. Who are your role models, and what invisible lessons are you learning from them right now? Are they building up your self-efficacy, or are you vicariously learning habits you'd much rather leave behind? Remember, you are an active processor of your environment. Choose your models wisely. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.